All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are ready to convene. Ombudsman Ziemba is available. We are reconvening the 110th meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission to conclude, perhaps, our deliberations on the Category 2 license award, although award will not be made before tomorrow. I think we will start with, as we talked about yesterday, reviewing a variety of questions. And Ombudsman Ziemba, you want to just give us a quick status report of the process that took place?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, we asked for any comments regarding material errors in anything that was part of the presentations or part of the packets over the last couple of days. We received submissions from each of the applicants up until 3 o'clock yesterday. That was our cutoff. One attachment was submitted after the deadline, but the substance of the issue was included in the text that you have before you. So by way of process, what we determined we would do, each of the commissioners that are in charge of the specific issue would address the questions of material error, and they will give a presentation on whether or not they believe it is a material error, whether or not it's an interpretation or otherwise, and they may provide further explanatory materials. Staff and our consultant team have been working with each of the commissioners over the last couple of days to make sure that we address all of these questions to the degree that they should be addressed.
Okay. And so commissioners will go through the categories, and at the same time, you can answer the questions that were raised by the commissioners during the evaluation discussion yesterday as well. Okay. So in no particular order, oh no, I guess let's do the order that we started with yesterday. The first was Site and Building Design, Commissioner McHugh.
You asked a question at the end of the Site and Building Design presentation about the prior permitting, and I've got a couple of slides that I'd like to use here just because I can't give up this little button thing. I love it so much. This is the diagram we used,
Right.
And here is the site at the intersection of I-90 and Route 117. This area here is about 400,000 square feet, and that was all permitted for retail development. Now, the next slide.
And actually has retail development.
Actually has retail development. That was the Walmart there and the like. Right. Now, this is the pyramid site. Unfortunately, we've now turned the last diagram on its side. This is I-90 here. This is a 1990 permit plan. This is Route 117 here. This is I-90 here. This is about the location of the proposed gaming facility. This is the Leominster Lancaster town line here. So this is about 1 million square feet, and it includes all of the area that the gaming establishment is proposed to sit on, plus much land to the east, and much of the land that was permitted where the target is as well. I have one more slide that shows what that plan was supposed to look like when built out. This is the entrance to what now is the entrance to Jungle Road. So this area was proposed to be part of that plan. And this is where the gaming facility will be located, right in here. And then it stretches over to there.
This is the pyramid project?
That's the pyramid.
And that goes back to 1990?
1990. So I can't tell you what the status of those permits is, but I can tell you that was what the applicant gave us, what the cordage companies gave us as the permitting that was done at that time. And there's no reason to doubt it. It bears all the seals and marks and hallmarks of authenticity.
So that was a more expansive project than what's being considered now, because
much more expensive. This was, as I say, this was 1 million square feet. I don't know. I don't know the square footage of what's proposed now, or the footprint, but the footprint for what's proposed now fits about in there someplace.
Okay.
Right along Jungle Road. The Walmart is right in here someplace, maybe right in there, and then you come down Jungle Road, and the facility is right in there. So that's much bigger than what was planned, what's currently being thought of.
And that was the point that I made in my presentation and was asking you about, because this area is very, very likely going to be developed for some such commercial site, some such commercial project at some point, and that just is somewhat of a mitigating factor, I thought, on some of the concerns, the community concerns.
All right, now, there were several questions. Each applicant actually raised a question about the things I said about traffic mitigation. And so let me respond to those questions as succinctly as I can. The Leominster applicant raised a question about what I said regarding the left-hand turn from the southbound lane on I-90. And
This was the exit from I-90
the
southbound.
exit from
going left.
I-90 southbound, going left.
Want to use your pointer?
Sure, I would use the pointer, but I got nothing to point at, but I still can use it. I like that pointer so much. Actually, yeah, sure.
I feel like I got to get out of your way.
Yeah, down to the left. So what I wanted to say about that is, before the facility can open, everybody agrees that there will have to be improvements made to the intersection of Jungle Road and 117. Whatever improvements are necessary for the left-hand turn off of the I-90 exit can proceed on a separate track. And that should not be a factor that affects the opening of this facility. And this ties into what I hope I said during that presentation. I want to reiterate today that there's some fluidity to the entire traffic mitigation piece of this. And so I think we have to understand that. And once the licensee is chosen, I think that collaboration with the Department of Transportation will occur, and these things can be expedited over perhaps where they seem to be at the moment. So that's what I have to say about the Leominster thing. It can proceed on a separate track. It is not a site generated traffic, and it can proceed on a separate track. I said that there was some tension between DOT and Plain Ridge and the town of Plainville with respect to whether the jug handle approach or the break in Route 1 was appropriate and should be pursued. Both the applicant and the town now say that they are prepared to do whatever DOT wishes. So there isn't that tension between the applicant and the town that I mentioned on my presentation on Tuesday.
So that was an important point, so let's make sure. So what I took away yesterday was that the DOT preferred solution was something that the town was resistant to, but which I thought was an important point, but I'm hearing you say that that's not correct.
We were informed by the town that they, like the applicant, will abide by DOT's decision.
Okay.
and enthusiastically try to implement it.
Okay.
And finally, I said that according to DOT, a completion of the 138-106 intersection improvement was necessary before the Phase 1 opening could occur for the Raynham site. Raynham said that that was not necessary. I was simply quoting from the DOT, basing my remarks entirely on the DOT letter. That's what DOT said, and said that Raynham should work with the Department of Transportation to ensure that the improvements to the 138-106 intersection were made before the Phase 1 opening. Whether that's a condition of opening it, whether DOT has the right to impose that condition, remains somewhat ambiguous, but that's what the dot letter said. And I understand that the Rainham applicant contests that, doesn't believe that it is necessary. That, again, is one of the things that shouldn't be an impediment to what we do, because I think that'll be worked out after we've made the final decision. That intersection is 5 miles north of the site, but it leads directly to the site. That's what Dot has said. That's the best I can do. There were, that's the best I can do. And that is, those are the traffic issues that were raised and that I deemed material suggestions with respect to correction.
Okay. And that was it?
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions for Commissioner McHugh?
Oh.
Okay. Commissioner Zuniga, the finance questions.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask Rob Scarpelli to join us at the front. I'm going to tackle the questions. I may need his input, or even Lyle, you know, if you could also join Rob in case we need you. The finance section got a lot of questions from applicants. I believe most of them are not an error or a fact, but I will touch on them. Several of them are a matter of interpretation. I do want to talk about a few of them because it's important interpretations. They bear on the market assessment and numbers, and I think it's relevant for us to understand them. But I do want to first start with what we believe may have been an error or an error of interpretation. I'll start with what we have here, number 3. There was PPE says that I mentioned or questioned that the plan to lease 10% of its slots. PPE Leominster, yeah. I did mention that leasing 10% of its slots seemed higher than industry norms. I want to clarify what we meant by leased products and what the applicant may have meant by leased products, which are perhaps different things. The way we view leased products are games that the manufacturers will only lease to operators. They will not sell certain products because those are high desirable products, and the arrangements that some operators often engage in with that some manufacturers often engage with casino operators are along the lines of, if you want this particular type of game, you have to lease it from us, and we have some participation in terms of revenues, or there's a rent. There is also the notion of financing lease, which is what the applicant in this case may have interpreted. When we ask the question relative to lease products, you could, as an operator, can come and can purchase product or slot machines from a manufacturer in a lease to own, or simply a lease arrangement or capital lease, in which you make periodic payments, and after some time, a terminal payment, you could keep it, etc. Much like anybody would lease a car with an option to buy. So after our question, the applicant may have, it appears that they combined the two notions, and therefore our assessment that the lease products, where we meant relative to only the leasing of games, that assessment is not the case. That number is not as high as we thought.
In any case, it seems to me that this is really not a variable one way or the other. It doesn't, there's no pro or con for Leominster as a, for Cordish as a consequence of leases or not. I mean, if it would have relevance if there were a lot of leases because they didn't have the capital resources to do the job, that might be a question, but that's clearly not the case. So I take it that this is really not an issue to worry about one way or the other.
I don't worry about the rating. We could talk more about operations in a larger context later. I wish we get into that discussion, but we did mention that it was higher than expected, and they did clarify it really included two numbers where we were really only thinking of one, or one component. All right. There was also a question from PPE relative to a statement we made regarding the applicants.
Use Leominster just so.
I'm sorry, I keep saying, they typed it in here as PPE, but thank you for the clarifying. A Leominster applicant is clarifying that we made a statement that applicants did not provide details on their proposed slots mix. We were looking, and the difference here is the difference between slots mix and slots plan. We were looking for a slots plan that would tie into their business plan. The applicant did provide a number of components of their slots plan, one of them their slots mix, in different pieces of the application. And to their credit, we asked, the way we structured those questions in the application were in different areas. What we mean by a slots plan is the retention percentage, the amount of lease games, the whole strategy, the mix of slots, et cetera, et cetera. So the applicant did provide that information. He provided it in different pieces. We would have liked to see it on a consolidated piece of the business plan, but we didn't ask for it that way. So we stand corrected that they did provide components of a slots plan, and we corroborated that yesterday. There are other questions that I think I'll address when we get into a market assessment discussion, which I think we should. So I'll just get to.
Why not do that now?
Should we do that now? Okay.
If it was issues that were raised, I think.
Yeah. Well, let me group up many of them because I don't want to. I think several of the questions we received had to do with our market assessment. Different applicants say that the drive time between a particular point, in the middle of a region to the proposed site takes, however many minutes. So I think this is where I need your help, Rob. I think it bears explaining that the maps that we put up were superposed maps of two things. A theoretical drive time, usually and maybe John, if you can find one of our presentations that has the superimposed maps. Not that one. One with we'll get to that.
That one was brain synapses.
Actually, I think that's a very important map that shows that everybody has access at some point to a number of facilities in the region. But next, one further down, John, because maybe one of the applicants. There's a few further down.
Actually, Commissioner, that's probably a good one. It addresses two issues.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Here's the line that is, of course, looks a lot like a border within the state or within Connecticut and Rhode Island. There is a visual representation of the drive time from that from those points into the facility. However, in order to do our market assessment, we took the regions and subregions that are not those squiggly lines, but the ones that are in colors. You would see, for example, Worcester. There you go. Thank you. So this is only a visual representation, but when we look at the market assessment, we take at the market share that we believe is going to come from each of the regions that are contiguous to the facility or at the facility. So if you go to a next map where we superposed, there it is. This is a good example. This is only the theoretical drive time, the 30-minute drive time and the 60-minute drive time. But what we're doing when we're doing the market assessment is we're taking all the population that resides in these, I think it's a metropolitan statistical area, is the term, and assessing that 40% of those people could be captured by the facility here. Similarly, all of the adult population in this area, we are saying that 70% of all of those adults could be clients of this facility. So the further MSAs or metropolitan statistical areas capture a smaller number for each of the cases, but they come from all of the region as it's defined. Do you want to expound on that, Rob?
Another way to explain it is that all references to drive times are just for presentation purposes, so you can get a sense of the distance, whatever. Everything was done off of market areas, and in some maps, if you go back to, John? Yeah, in all maps where you see comments on the top right-hand corner, 30-minute drive time, that's just for visual presentation purposes if you're not used to reading the market area assessment, whatever. So all drive times used in the presentations were really on a relative basis between sites.
Is that, do you think I should expound further? I think it explains the difference between some of the numbers that especially people thought, well, if I go into MapQuest or Google, the drive time between here and there is whatever, 35 minutes and not less than 30. The point is that we're making an aggregate of the adults that live in the areas for which we have the adult population and assessing a percent market capture that the facility could get. And all of those market captures, and especially under the full competition scenario, is distributed, and they all have to add up to 100. So anything that, next slide, John, if you don't mind. No, the next one. So when we compare a facility like the one in Leominster to a one in Plainville, or actually, let me correct that. When we compare a facility of Leominster to the licenses in Boston and Springfield, we reduce these percentages by some factor because those facilities will start to get percentage market from their own contiguous statistical areas.
So I take it from what you're saying that the little notations about drive time are to help the observer understand approximate distances, but that the market share results really are based on a more sophisticated kind of analysis that draws on percentages of populations in concentric radiuses around the proposed slots parlay.
Thank you. I couldn't have summarized it as well, and I think you just did.
Make sure that I understand what you were saying.
Yep, that is it.
Right. Okay.
So those squiggly mile lines shouldn't be taken as the one factor. So there were a number of questions on that, but I think I addressed all of them with that clarification.
Let me ask one. I raised the issue that we talked quite a bit about yesterday, that I see the numbers, I understand the numbers, and I raised this sort of intuitive sense that somehow just didn't quite make sense. The Chamber of Commerce from Worcester had the report done by the Innovation Group, and the Innovation Group suggested a different relative productivity. Would you explain what your difference was with them, that why you disagreed with the Innovation Report, or why they disagreed with you?
Let me, before he does that, and you can go to that, to whatever slide, let me just introduce that. Because I made a judgment call not to spend a lot of time on my presentation relative to that or other studies. I wanted to, I knew that our presentation was going to be long enough and tech-heavy, and I really wanted to highlight the methodology, yes, dry and technical. And I did want to highlight the methodology that we used. However, having said that, we did look at it. As soon as it arrived to our desk, to my desk, I forwarded to our consultants and said, what do you make of this, really? Because from the preliminary findings, this is perhaps a different conclusion. In a nutshell, and perhaps Rob will help me substantiate this, the projections that the Innovation Group comes out with on their stabilized year, 2018, if I remember correctly.
So post-competition.
Post-competition, right. Is very similar to it's actually right on point with the range that we come up with for that market area, for the Leominster area. So we could almost leave it there. Our point yesterday, 2 days ago, relative to our assessment, is that the applicant is above those, in their projections for a post-competition scenario, they're above those numbers. Did you want to expound a little bit on that?
Yeah, John, can you go back 2 slides? Sorry, up one. Perfect, right there. 2 things a little bit of background. Because it was presented, because it was submitted to the commission, a couple things you understand. The Innovation Group projected in 2018 that Leominster would get roughly around 152 million. Our range under the various win per capitas, or GGRs per capitas, are up to 147, so we're saying 125 to 150. So there's currently no difference. That's number one. Number 2 is they actually did this type of assessment where they broke down the area into market areas. We also should be acknowledged that we did review all of the applicants' third-party market assessments, which Innovation Group did provide a market assessment for another applicant into this. So we looked at all their assessments. And what they're saying at Leominster was, I think, 152. Because it's in the report that was public, that was submitted to the commission, what they're suggesting for Plainville, I think, is 144. And what they're suggesting for Raynham, I think, was 114 less. So we looked at those numbers. We also looked at where the markets were coming from there. Because when you look at a report, you should look at the balance between, because they projected out all the different casinos. And I would make, without studying it in full, the one point I would make is with this marketplace, because we have different types of facilities, you have to look, when you look at the Category 2s, you should look at what the Category 2s are doing, but at the same token, you should look at what the Category 1s are doing. And I would point out one point is that in our assessment, when you look at it, we're saying the Category 1s can draw from a little farther away and should be able to have a greater market share than a Category 2. I would make this note that in the case of both Raynham and Plainville, the Boston Casino is going to draw more dollars from Raynham and Plainville's market area than what Raynham and Plainville are going to draw from Boston. Logically, it would make sense. But when it comes to the Leominster proposal, They're actually saying Leominster is going to draw more dollars from Boston than what Boston's going to draw from Leominster. On the surface, I would say probably doesn't make sense for that. So we did look at that report as we looked at all third-party reports and all other reports prepared for this marketplace.
And that's the essence of the gravity notion. The higher the facility, the bigger the draw, the higher quality the facility. And in our case, the lower the tax. It's an inverse. The facility, the category ones, because they have a lower tax rate, will be able to draw and do more promotions, for example, and draw from greater circles compared to the category twos. So.
Okay.
Let me see. There was, since we were on those maps, there was a question relative to there was a couple of questions. Maybe we should touch on Taunton. Just one of the maps, John, that has, the different facilities and the market areas. We are not making any assumptions relative to how likely an Indian facility, at this point, how likely an Indian facility is, or how soon an Indian facility is likely to come into the area, into the Region C area. That's going to be a healthy discussion in a few months when we make the decision as to whether to license a commercial license there. When we did the market projections, I'm sorry, we did not make, when we assessed the projections from the applicants, all applicants considered full competition, and in the case of both the Raynham and the Plainville applicant, they considered that and spoke about a reduction in the revenues, in the revenue projections, because of the potential of another facility or a competing facility in their neighborhood. We've heard the possibility that there could be an applicant come to the area of Bridgewater. There could also be two applicants there is at least one applicant now that's proposing to build something in Fall River, in New Bedford, and potentially another one in Fall River. So from a market assessment perspective, as we looked at a full competition scenario, we are acknowledging that the applicants themselves acknowledge there would be some loss from nearby operations from that region.
And in fact, some of the numbers that they've submitted show a decrease in revenue after year 3, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Much of that decrease in revenue, by the way, comes from the licensing of Category 1s.
Right.
That's what our applicants can safely assume, because they watch us and they watch us make progress, and we're gonna issue a license likely on those regions. There's another piece that I did want to mention that is very hard to measure, and that is how the competition is going to react to the opening of these facilities. In one case, the competition is known. Connecticut and Rhode Island, we know their operations, we know their size. It is very unlikely that there will be another facility in either one of those states. But when we say we don't know how the competition is going to react, they could offer a number of promotions, or they could do a number of things, mostly along the lines of free play, for example, and that is something that the operator will have to calibrate. However, there is also something to be said about New Hampshire. At this time, there is nothing in New Hampshire, but it's no secret that the legislature there has been considering casinos there. Who knows if our licensing process is gonna serve as a catalyst, maybe that's the wrong word, for them to pass legislation there. But how they react also has an element of unknown and something that should be considered. In all of the market area assessment that we did, we always considered some capture of New Hampshire, Southwest, and East, and mostly because these are the only areas that have enough proximity and population for us to really think about. If and when New Hampshire approved anything, we would likely see a drop in terms of market capture from those areas.
Even, is that independent of the location? I mean, if you have a location of this facility over in the Rye area, for example, is that going to draw away from Leominster in all likelihood?
Yes, to some degree, and it's all a matter of what and how much. There's, the Boston facility is likely to draw from New Hampshire. I mean, people live in New Hampshire and commute into Boston, so it's safe to say that some population in New Hampshire will be able to access the facility in Boston. If there is one in Leominster, that's certainly also the case, although there's less direct routes in this corridor. You're going to have to, when you're up here, you probably use some either Route 3, I believe, or 93 and get on 495. But of course, this could be a preferred location for people in southern New Hampshire.
Well, I just asked that question because you had small percentages already in that other map we looked at coming from those two, the green and the yellow area in New Hampshire. And so I was interested in how much of that one could reasonably expect to lose if the facilities say the New Hampshire facilities say we're over in Rye.
In Rye, New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Right.
Over
Probably a significant amount. The point is that people will have access to multiple places. Then it becomes a question of operation and marketing and loyalty programs and things like that. And in many cases, people will patronize more than one facility. So,
Just while we're on this, what I was mentioning yesterday in trying to have as one of our variables the strategic, the defensive and offensive, but we want to locate as strategically as we can, and there is, and part of this intuitive sense is if there isn't something here, then there is this big vacant hole that really invites a strong facility to come in and will inevitably suck out something from Massachusetts, less than it would suck out than if we had some kind of a barrier up there, of a facility up there.
that's intuitive, but I still believe that the problem is that this area is both going to be served to some degree by this facility, and it's not that heavily populated. I was thinking a little bit about much of the knowledge that our consultants have imparted on us, or on me in this case. I kept thinking from a purely strategic, intuitive sense what some other jurisdictions have done in the past. In the case of Ontario, when Ontario first approved casinos, they located, which is an often a move that was palatable for the population, locate them as far away as possible and as close to our neighbors as possible, so that we can draw, which is, this is how Las Vegas was born. The welcome to Las Vegas sign is if you're coming from LA. There's no welcome to Las Vegas sign if you're coming from the other side. Of course, Las Vegas, since people were driving to Las Vegas, has turned into a mecca. But when it started, it was on a drive time basis, and it was chiefly drawing patrons from Los Angeles. When Ontario approved casinos, the casino in Windsor, right across the river from Detroit, and the casino in Niagara were doing tremendous. And they were doing a lot of, they were taking a lot of revenues from their neighbors just across the river, or in the case of Niagara, just across the falls. The way, what has happened since then is Detroit approved casinos, and or even earlier than that, the tribal operation in Niagara, New York, opened up as a strategic defense move. And you could argue, well, why didn't New York put it in the middle of New York? Because there was a lot of density where they put it, and they were also recapturing a lot of players. Detroit is doing the same thing. Detroit actually has now 3 casinos in that area, and since then the casino in Windsor has really seen their revenues drop because most of their clientele actually came from the Detroit side, from the suburbs of Detroit. So it goes back to the density and what people might prefer. People might go, might not necessarily bypass a facility if it's convenient. They might bypass it if it's too crowded, for example, or if there's other amenities further down the road and they prefer those amenities. But there's a case to be made that there's a defensive strategic move to put them where they're close to our neighbors.
Right.
So the bottom line there is that it is unlikely, if New Hampshire comes to the party, that it's going to pitch a tent right there on the, above the Leominster site. It'd pitch it, that tent farther east toward a greater population center, right?
Well, what I understand from the reports is that New Hampshire would put it right around Rockingham Park, where there's along Route is it
93,
Route 93, where there's a big corridor of traffic
Right.
that comes from Massachusetts.
Right.
They're not going to look to geographic diversity, and they're not going to put it up in Franconia Notch, for example, where there's not a lot of population or out-of-state visitors.
Right. And they're not going to put it in the middle of a wilderness to the west of, way to the west of 93.
Nope, that's right.
Okay.
More?
Let's see. There's some talk about free play. I could get into it since we're on it. One of the applicants says that we raised the issue of free play only as part of the marketing strategy. They say free play is a promotional tool and player acquisition, retention, and yield maintenance, which we all agree with. Whether we call it marketing strategy or retention, it is a fact. It's a tool they have. Where we're making a judgment call relative to free play is relative to their understanding of the competitive environment. I like to think of free play as we own 49% of anything that they give out, that we, the Commonwealth, because free play comes off from the top, and any money that they give out is money that we don't realize. And if the operator is projecting a big, and the other point here also is capacity constraint is very important here. So we only have, the operators here only have 1,250 machines. They are projecting that everybody is projecting that those 1,250 machines are going to be doing higher than average, compared to other jurisdictions, win per dollar per machine. I'm sorry, win per day per machine. Everybody is well north of $300, which seems to be a little bit of a market industry rule of thumb. Whenever there is no restriction in the number of machines, and operators start to get to the threshold of $300 per win per day, per machine per day, they add on more machines, so that then people can have more choices. In this case, they won't be able to add machines. They're all projecting that they'll be doing in excess of $300. And so the question then is, what are you doing, giving the level of free play that you're offering? You're tying up a machine with free money when you may have, when you're projecting that you're going to have people waiting, and he's a paying customer. So what we wanted to see and made sense to see was a very low level of free play when in the beginning years, when there's not a lot of competition, and not zero, because it's a good tool to get people in the door. But then as a modest rise, once there's competition of free play, a modest rise of free play percentage, in order to then be able to retain some of the customers, because some of them are going to be going to other places. Here's another way to think about it. A large number of free play, even in a post-competition or in a competition scenario, is also available to your competition. So or in this case, to the competition of the category 2. So any amount of free play that the operator gives out, the competition has the ability to do as well. And because the category 2 is a facility that is restricted by the number of machines and the level of tax compared to the others, we're suggesting it's not a fight that they want to engage. It's not a fight that they can win if they get into a price war, quote unquote, giving a lot of free play. So those numbers, when I mention them, are in the context of that competitive environment and the financing or the financial projections rather. And that's how we draw inferences that the operator was savvy to understand that competitive marketplace.
Anything else?
I think that was it. I think that was it. Those were the questions I thought were worthy of addressing.
Regarding the Credit Suisse issue?
I'm sorry?
The Credit Suisse issue?
Yeah. There was, we made a statement relative to a condition not being met by the letter of credit from Credit Suisse in the case of the applicant Raynham. Since they have forwarded a letter to Council Blue dated yesterday that perhaps clarifies some of that. We believe this is perhaps an effort to improve their application. We still maintain that this is not an error in fact or judgment. So it doesn't really. I don't see it as an error of fact that we have presented.
Okay, that it? I guess it was mitigation?
I did not have
You had none?
questions to respond to.
Okay.
There was one piece of a traffic question with regard to Plainville, but Commissioner McHugh covered that issue.
Okay.
Mitigated that issue?
Very well.
Without interruption. Commissioner Stebbins.
Sure. I have a couple of corrections, adjustments to make. First, with respect to the project in Leominster, the issue was raised that I had indicated that one applicant was the only applicant with a labor peace agreement. I believe the language I had used was a project labor agreement. But what we did was went back, took an inventory of the documents we have received, and I'll just give a quick inventory to those. We received a letter from the Massachusetts Building Trades Council, Frank Callahan, who has been in front of this body before. He highlighted in his letter verbiage out of Section 18 regarding whether the applicant has included detailed plans for assuring labor harmony during all phases of the construction, reconstruction, renovation, development, and operation of the gaming establishment. He wrote to us just a little over a week, just under 2 weeks ago, that a form of a written agreement with the building trades covering the proposed gaming establishments had been reached with both Penn National for their proposal in the town of Plainville, and with PPE Casino Resorts Massachusetts for their proposal in the city of Leominster. We also were able to identify the fact that those same two applicants had also reached labor peace agreements with the Seafarers Entertainment and Allied Trades Union. So those were the documents that had been presented to us. We also had received a copy of a project labor agreement from Penn National.
PLA or labor harmony agreement?
A project labor agreement.
Okay.
The second item that had come up was indicated during the hearing that there was no job estimate for the M3D3 program that Leominster PPE has, in their application, has said that they would be financially supportive of over a 5-year period. The comment was made or was alluded to that there was no job estimate for the M3D3 program. What I believe I had said was that the jobs were identified in the program were projected or speculative. I might use that terminology, but going back to the M3D3 program material that was included in the application, just to clarify, there is in this section, again, this document provided to us from UMass and Mass Live Casino, an average startup medical device company, I'm reading this from the text, device company or device grows to employ approximately 70 people over 15 years with an average $75,000 salary per worker for a total payroll of over $5 million. A needs assessment has shown that a mature M3D3 expects to result in up to 10 products/companies per year, which in turn could create over 5,000 high-paying jobs and 15,000 indirect jobs over the next 20 years. So that's to clarify the material. Again, I thought I had made the comment that the numbers were speculative or projected, but we do have the information available as to what UMass projects for direct and indirect jobs created over the 20-year period of as a result of the M3D3 program.
Over a 20-year period, is that what it was?
Yes.
What you said? I think that is fairly different from what we were talking about. I think you were talking to Commissioner McHugh about, I think we did say that we couldn't, that there weren't projections or estimates.
Right.
And there are, and that's an important distinction. Granted, they are utterly and totally speculative. They're based on reasoned judgments, but there are, in fact, projected estimates of what could be generated.
The final point that Leominster made was an assumption they believe made in the presentation that all racing-related jobs would disappear if the Category 2 facility was not located at the track. They referenced information about the 9% of gross gaming revenue, which will from the Category 2 facilities that will go into a racing fund. Again, I look back and I didn't believe that in my presentation I stated the racing-related jobs would disappear. I believe I had made a comment that the Plainville application offered the best opportunity for uninterrupted harness racing in the state. So hopefully that clarifies that statement. With respect to Plainville, and Mr. Chairman, I think this question came from you, was a more detail was requested about cross-marketing agreements signed with Plainville and a number of the area businesses. To just kind of recap, and I think there was a question about whether some of the bigger facilities, i.e. Patriot Place or TPC, had signed letters of agreement. We went back. There are 41 MOUs that have currently been signed between Plainville and a number of area businesses of all sizes. There is an MOU that was included in the original RFA2 application with the Rentham Village Premier Outlets. All of the MOUs are generally the same verbiage in each document. There was a signed letter of understanding, a shorter one-page document that was signed between Plainville and Live Nation / Comcast Center. There was also a MOU that was included from, I'm going to misspeak the name of the group, I believe the Cowlin Group that operates a number of the hotels in the area, including a number of hotels that are in the Patriot Place footprint. So I believe that would answer your question.
Yeah, thank you, that's very helpful. Okay, I guess that's it. Is that, we covered everything? Ombudsman Ziemba?
I believe so. There might be, hold on one second. There was one point that was raised by the Raynham proposals, and they took issue that Brockton Racing proposal only was backed by a verbal statement in Raynham Park Phase 2 application. And they note that there is ample documentation regarding the Brockton Harness Racing proposal, including a copy of the racing application, which the Racing Division subsequently granted.
Okay. All right, now, let's get to it. I think what we talked about yesterday makes sense, and that is to just sort of get a status report from each of us. You know, what are our, how do we judge what we've heard? What are we seeing as critical variables? What are we seeing as critical issues?
I just would make an opening comment. We had briefly mentioned at the end of before the end of yesterday's proceedings, the question about weighting, what evaluation criteria might be weighted more than others. It would be my opinion that we make it perfectly clear that if we do assign a weighting and evaluation of the Category 2 applicants, that that in no way should imply that that same weighting of the evaluation criteria would carry over to the Category 1 applicants.
Yeah.
Tourism, for a great example, we fully expect Category 1 applicants to demonstrate an ability to draw tourists. Should be part of their business strategy, obviously. Because we're considering facilities that operate on a more regional basis, it wasn't as big a factor, at least in my evaluation, and I would look forward to it being part of the Category 1 applicant evaluation.
Yeah.
I would agree. That's a very important piece. I would expect the WOW/overview to be more important in the second phase, and pieces of mitigation as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
But I also think that how we get individually and thus collectively to a conclusion is inevitably going to be a blend of all the information that we've heard and the weights we think various parts of that information deserve. And I think we need to articulate that, but I'm not certain that we need to come to a consensus on the weight that each of the factors is entitled to receive. It may be that that consensus emerges as we move forward, but to spend time, and I don't know if that was your
No,
initial intent.
it wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with
Because
you.
I think there's no, we all bring a variety of different backgrounds and experiences
Right.
and approaches and thoughts to this process, and it seems to me we ought to articulate those, where we're coming from, but there's many ways to get to the same destination.
Right.
I'm happy to start, Mr. Chair.
All right, great.
If you'd like.
I would.
So, I'm just going to go through many points that I put together and, and lead to what I think is the most important, and I will mention weighting as part of this. So we heard presentations about the three candidates. We all, I think I heard from everyone that each are capable of successfully having a facility in the Commonwealth and running it professionally and well. But this is a competition, and there were lots of factors to consider. After listening to everyone's presentations, I believe we have two candidates that rose above the third in just about everyone's category. I want to agree with Chairman Crosby that the Carney family is very impressive, beloved, good citizens, good neighbors, tremendous community support, a local businessman. It's been a pleasure to get to know all the applicants, including the Carney family. But after all of my review of all the presentations, their application did not contain the substance and the detail that the others do, which left all of us in scoring those sections lower. I don't believe the Rainham application scored ahead of the others in any of our 5 categories. So that led me to really look at the other 2 applications, which each scored very high, and they were close, frankly. When I looked at all of the scores and all of the relevant factors, because I think there are other considerations other than just how they did in mitigation or building design. So I'll speak to those as well. As far as weighting, I've thought this all along, finance and economic development are key, and in my mind, more important factors than the other 3 categories. Having said that, in finance, even with the conversations on market assessment, and by the way, after having long conversations with our consultants, we're very impressed with the science, the analysis, and the ability to explain to me and help me understand those issues. But even, with some varying opinions on the market analysis, finance gave the lead to Plainville. And there were many reasons. Commissioner Zuniga went through all of those reasons, and there was a clear edge there. Economic development, another important aspect, talking about jobs and all the other factors. Both of those applicants, Plainville and Leominster, were equally as strong, according to Commissioner Stebbins. With mitigation, the edge went to Plainville. An important piece of that was very strong community support as well. Building and design had both, I'm really summarizing and probably not doing justice to all of the work that was done, but equally strong for both of those applicants in building and design. The overview, gave an edge to Leominster, although Chairman Crosby readily pointed out that probably isn't as important a weighting factor than all of the others because of the nature and size of the facility. But nevertheless, did give an edge to the Leominster facility. Some other considerations, so we're really, there's a lot of very competitive here, but taking into consideration other factors, I think valuing racing is an important piece, or valuing all of the additional amenities or something added value to the application, which all three of them had. We had an opportunity to speak about it yesterday, the memo from HLT, which really did find a way to try to quantify, what are we talking about purely from a numbers perspective, although it is bigger than numbers. We're talking about a lot of employees when it comes to the racing. But the $13 million and the, I believe it's 75 full-time employees, and then all the other ancillary businesses that go along with racing. And, it's not obviously a direct comparison to M3D3, but there's a $1.5 million investment there. And the opportunity for jobs, we talked about some prognosis, although it is speculative. So when I compare the two, frankly, I value the racing, the ability to have racing continue in a full-time capacity, I saw as an important additional consideration here. Also, when I looked at all of the categories, there was a consistent theme about experience, an edge to the Plainville applicant when it came to experience. I know that we saw that in mitigation, just more detailed answers, more, excuse me, more just a subject matter expertise, and and I heard this from the other commissioners as well, just the ability to, when you successfully own and operate 28 facilities and a number of racing facilities, that level of experience I thought was important in this competition. Very quality Leominster application, all of them were very quality applications. It makes this job difficult. But in my mind, after reviewing everything, I see an edge to the Plainville application in totality. I could go on with more detail, but I think I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners on this.
You also want to jump in?
Sure, because I want to talk about points that Commissioner Cameron has made. I think the topic of racing did not fall squarely in any one of the buckets of the categories. I go back a little bit to when we were organizing the application document, and the approach was mostly taking from the statute the goals, the prerequisites, and the documentation that we're supposed to assess in terms of the different sections in the and priorities of the legislation. We rolled them up, we sort of sorted them, and came up with these five categories that I think have served us very well. But when it relates to racing, there's a significant component that I saw in the financials that you were touching on, Commissioner, and our consultants pointed out in terms of spend.
In terms of what?
Expenditures. 13 million. Some of it comes from purses, from the Horse Race Development Fund. The majority of it comes from the operation of the track, etc. So, however, the case is elsewhere. It's in another
Resource development, 30 million isn't resource development fund.
No, but
The 2.7 is to purses.
Yes.
But not the fund.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. The economic development, or rather, the business case for racing comes, I thought, under the economic development piece, because it is not just a topic of jobs. It's also a topic of supporting small business. Many of the people that are around or survive on this industry or take their livelihoods from this industry qualify as a small business. They're a small farm with 3 or 4 people, 5 horses or more, all over the state. And support for that small business really comes from support for the operations in racing. I do draw a comparison to M3D3 when it comes to racing. The Horse Race Development Fund, and I don't want to get this number wrong, but is split. The 9% that comes to the fund is split. The majority of it goes to, some of it goes to purses, but most of it goes to purses. But some of it goes to the Sires program that is a little bit of a long lead. It's all, the intention of it is to get breeding of horses, more breeding of horses in Massachusetts, because there will be a payoff to the horse owner in the near future in terms of races that only apply to Massachusetts-bred horses. So I think that's the same model that M3D3 uses. There's monies that go as seed money towards this activity, and hopefully turn into economic development because it piggybacks on activity that is there. When it comes back to, I'm still on the topic of racing, it's a topic of economic development because I also see it as the preservation. Much like we have, it is better to have $1 on hand than a dollar tomorrow. It's better to have a job today than a job tomorrow. So if with our decision we were to take, we were to effectively result in the track closing, there will be a number of people out of work the next day, or actually that day. They would probably see it as a pink slip. So I think while everybody is very close in many of these areas, I think that's something that we have to value. I value, and I think it's important to mention. So you see where I'm going with my decision, but I'll mention other things. In essence, this was about money and jobs, and you heard me about the money. You've heard me a little bit about the jobs. It's not easy to compare one job to another. It's different jobs. I put on there under the jobs I already mentioned the support to small business, because there's surrounding businesses that support that activity. But I will also concentrate on the topic of how of an operator. This is going to be a competitive market, and the category 2 is the one that has the most hurdles when it comes to operating in this competitive environment. I came to really appreciate that the higher tax, and the limit on slot machines really result in the need to have a very strong operator, because they will have a lot less at their disposal when it comes to marketing dollars or operating against or in the presence or in the proximity of Category 1 applicants. Unlike other jurisdictions where they have taxed slot machines with one tax rate and table games with another tax rate, our Category 1 and 2 difference I think is very significant and worthy of note. And I believe that Penn understands very well those dynamics. They not only operate with the same type of number of machines in other places, they really operate in a number of competitive environments. So in that context, we've gone through my presentation where I felt that the market share was very comparable. There's a case to be made, strategic and otherwise, about the merits of where to locate it. But to me, in the final analysis, it comes down to how nimble, flexible, and a good operator can be in a competitive environment for the Category 2, and that is why I favor the Plainville proposal.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I looked at the basic heft of the criteria in essentially the same way. But I broke down economic development into jobs and other, and looked at things in that way. I say at the outset that I too, like Commissioner Cameron, think that Raynham Applicant Parks is fully capable of running an excellent facility. We saw an excellent facility in Bensalem. And George Carney and the group that has put its energies behind that proposal are iconic figures in not only the Raynham area, but here in Massachusetts as a whole. And so I appreciate the energy they put into it and who they are, but the proposal, I agree with Commissioner Cameron, did fall below the others, and well below the others, in a whole host of areas, notwithstanding that the wage projections were the highest of all three applicants. But we heard about those and discussed the other day. So I really look at this as a contest between the Leominster applicant and the Plainville applicant. And I think it is a very close contest. I think that the two applicants really looked at not only the gaming side of this, but a plan that was cohesive, fit the area where they are going to be, and created a theme that follows through not only the design of the building, but their approach to the application. In one case, a theme that really rests on a three-legged stool of dining and entertainment and gaming, plus community support, and on the other, racing, sports, and affinity with the neighborhood and gaming. So I think it is very close. But that said, I took a look first at jobs. And of the two applicants, by far the higher number of projected jobs is for Leominster. The salaries, by a considerable margin, of full-time jobs we're talking about. The salaries projected are higher than the salaries for Plainville in each category of jobs, including the facilities, which is in both sets of scales the lowest paid. The number of full-time jobs as opposed to part-time jobs with the Leominster applicant is higher by a significant margin. And that, to me, is an important factor because the part-time jobs obviously are not as, don't yield as much income as the full-time jobs, and the benefit packages that go with the part-time jobs are lower than the benefit packages that go with the full-time jobs. So you have a lower gross amount for all of those, and a more variable work schedule. I also took a look at where the jobs are going to be created. In the Leominster proposal, the unemployment rate is 6.7%. The average household income is $70,000, and the average price of a residence is $250,000. In the Plainville area, the unemployment rate is 4.8%, not great, but it's lower. The average household income is $82,000, and the average house price is $337,000. It is a more economically robust area. Leominster is a gateway city. It is a city that needs assistance economically and otherwise. It needs a path of entry for the people who are in that city into a workforce and into other workforces beyond those that gaming in and of itself will produce. And therefore, a facility that provides jobs for new jobs for people in that city offers not only new jobs, but a pathway into full integration into the society. I looked at projections as to the composition of the workforce, and here I want to be very careful. In the case of the Leominster applicant, their other facility in Maryland exists in an area that is demographically 73% white. The workforce is 70% minority. That is something of an indicator to me of the effort that they've made to be inclusive. Having said that, the Plainville applicant, Penn National, has done a terrific job across the country in reaching out to minority populations. The West Side Project in Columbus, Ohio is an example of that. Recognition they've gotten for their project in Wyandotte County, Kansas, is an indicator that they can do that. So both are more or less equal on that front. They both appreciate and know the importance of reaching out to minority communities. The construction costs, which translate into jobs ultimately, are about the same. Actually, they're a little higher for Plainville, but those are job creators as well. To the job creation piece of economic development, there I look next at the mitigation, the plans they have for dealing with and ensuring that those jobs and the money that goes to those people doesn't come at the expense of addiction prone individuals. Both of their approaches are satisfactory. Plainville has, Penn National has above industry, proceeds above industry standards in that regard. In other categories for economic development, we've heard about a number, but to me the ones that stuck out is the fact that Leominster plans for the restaurant end of its business to incorporate local restaurateurs. They did that in Maryland very successfully. They plan to do that here. They have MOUs for regional development, and the M3D3 program really is an ingenious effort at both job creation and advancing the high-tech industry that's the backbone of Massachusetts. In the finance category, which I rated next, both are well-equipped to mount this effort. The 5-year projections that they both have made to us, and they've been vetted by the teams, and we heard the vetting yesterday, but they both, at the end of 5 years, come out at almost exactly the same place in terms of gross gaming revenues. The difference is that after the stabilization period, after there's introduced competition, the Leominster applicant stays higher than the Plainville applicant does, so that the Plainville applicant's largest chunk of the 5-year gross gaming revenue projection comes in the first 3 years and then tapers off dramatically after year 3, when the Leominster applicant decreases slightly, but not nearly as much. And those are self-projections, and those, it seems to me, are realistic given the vicinity in which the competition So it has, for me, the ring of truth. The gross gaming revenues for the 5-year projection, according to HLT, is the highest of all three. And then the facility, I think, in both cases is attractive and capable of supporting the business plan that both applicants propose. You can't have a successful business plan if you don't have a facility that's capable of supporting it. And it seems to me that the facility that the Leominster applicant proposes, with its exterior entrances and its restaurants that are outside that are clearly places that people can go without being interested in gaming, and the concert, although you have to go through it, is an independently attractive facility, is to its credit and supports the business plan. On the other hand, in the Plainville applicant, the Flutie pub, the sports bar, is a well thought out piece of the facility that is designed to integrate around what I basically see as a sports theme, as I mentioned a minute ago: the racing, the nearby sporting attractions, and the gambling. In that regard, we talked a little bit yesterday about whether Flutie was a part of the Massachusetts brand, and sort of brushed that aside. But I think this was really a carefully thought out plan. In North Dakota, perhaps, Flutie is not a part of the Massachusetts brand to people who are looking there. In Massachusetts, it is, I think. That Hail Mary pass in the game in the mid-'80s is almost a mnemonic with the name Flutie. And then his storied career in Canadian and United States football, and of course he was the last person to do a drop kick successfully in the NFL. So there is a lot there, and I think that was very carefully thought out. Indeed, there is an earlier plan.
I think you've explained it a lot better than they did.
Well, yeah, but I'm ascribing all of this carefully, and I'll tell you why. Partly why, because there's another plan in that application. I didn't mention it the other day, that I suspect was a plan from the prior applicant that had the sports pub in the center and the restaurant on the exterior, and there was a switch made. And I think that was part of a very careful thinking on their part. So I give them credit for that. But so in the end, and that's why I think this is for me, such a close call. But in the end, it's the quality of the jobs, the number of full-time jobs, and the location where the jobs would be placed that tips the scale for me in favor of the Leominster applicant. I say that recognizing the hit that potentially is taken to the racing industry, and I value that industry enormously. I value the racing. I love the horses. I love the people that work in that industry. I love their attitude, the way they live close to nature and close to the ground, and I think it is definitely an industry worth preserving. And I will do everything I can as the commissioner, regardless of how this comes out, to find ways to preserve that industry. But I recognize the potential that my present decision may have with respect to an impact there. But I think that on balance, preservation of that industry is possible, and I think that locating this facility in the Leominster location for that region and for those people and for the Commonwealth, therefore, as a whole, is the better choice.
Commissioner Stebbins, you want to?
Well, obviously, Commissioner McHugh used all my notes. I want to. He had an excellent presentation, probably better than I could have delivered it. But I want to go back and touch on something that it hasn't been mentioned. I certainly don't think it has been overlooked. And that for me was the value of the host community hearing process, the statutory requirement to go out and have a hearing in the host community. And it's been reflected on before of, obviously, when we were down in Raynham, the accolades and the endorsements that were made to Mr. Carney and his family, and obviously his long-standing role in that community. It also occurred to me that night that there wasn't as significant amount of attention actually paid to the parks project itself. Again, we've all said this, there's certainly no indication that any of these three applicants cannot operate a successful slots parlor. But to people who might have a question as to what value we place on these host community hearings, this is only my own perspective, but for those in the upcoming round who think, why should I bother going, please understand that a lot of those comments, Commissioner Cameron reflected on comments she heard in the host community hearing with respect to local support. The comments and input are impactful, I think, in at least some of the elements I was weighing a decision on. I was somewhat discouraged during those host community hearings because I had a question which asked, define local. And my expectation might have been one thing, but the feedback I got was something different. And it's no fault of any of our applicants, but there was a focus on, well, we define local as anything that is within the host community and surrounding communities, both for purchasing, hiring. And as I thought back to what, for me, is one of the more compelling priorities of the statute, it's job creation. And I think picking up on what Commissioner McHugh mentioned, I was curious as to what impact all of our applicants thought they could have on the surrounding communities. Though there are not surrounding community agreements negotiated, obviously with every community, but as I look to the southeast, you know, there's certainly employment challenges in the city of Brockton. And I was mindful of, you know, what opportunities or what creativity our candidates could come up with. And again, most of the local hiring requirements were focused on the communities that the applicant had signed an agreement with. You move up to Leominster, and we were reminded of the Gateway City designation. The Gateway City designation obviously is a representation of the economic hardship that some of the communities that are so designated have had, unemployment levels, median income levels, educational attainment levels. And not only was Leominster a gateway city, but the neighboring community of Fitchburg, which I believe had an unemployment rate, or still maintains an unemployment rate of around 10%. So I was focused on, and I think to Commissioner McHugh's point, is to where the jobs could have the most impact. As I went through my analysis and presentation, I attempted and tried to make it very clear that we really wanted to compare apples to apples all the way across the board of all three applicants, even though all three of them had just different kind of external business strategies that would impact their overall ability to compete. If I, again, like my colleagues, kind of zero in on two of the applicants, both Plainville and Leominster, just some quick comments about each of their applications. Again, I was impressed by creativity. Again, you know, there were certain points that came up in both applications, and you we had a question about where your child care facility is going to be on the property. As Commissioner McHugh laid out, none of the footprints have child care facilities, but one applicant came up with a different strategy to approach the same question in terms of making a linkage with a local daycare provider. I saw steps from another applicant which showed how they plan to really get into the community to make sure that employment opportunities were going to be made available to the residents of that community. I also appreciate the value of jobs, the benefits that come with those jobs. I don't discriminate between full-time and part-time employment. Full-time employment is great. Part-time employment is certainly needed by a second income for a family. Part-time employment is certainly needed by a college student looking for some gainful employment during the summer. So I never discriminate on those counts. But looking at what benefits might accrue to an individual, there's certainly, through our analysis, there was some unbalance between Plainville and Leominster, from my recollection. What kind of overarching concern I have about employment is who is best going to be able to weather the storm when it comes to competition. And we asked each of our applicants to show what your employment would be in year one when there's no Massachusetts competition. We asked them for their stabilized year of maximum competition, however they sought to project that. Plainville had fewer jobs. Leominster certainly saw a decrease in the number of jobs. Both of those applicants, I think, demonstrated that we can't expect that employment, and I think this is an important notion for every community to understand, that those two applicants certainly reflect that there will be a decrease in employment when competition is realized. I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody, but it bears repeating. My concern subsequent to that is how can we make sure that the relationship between the Commonwealth of Communities and the applicant is maintained through the course of the life cycle of a license or the life cycle of their operations, and not really setting anybody up for failure. I appreciated the fact that Penn, I think based on their experience, has probably produced a more conservative forecast with respect to employment in the maximum competition years. Again, I think Leominster also forecasted, again, a decrease in employment, but based on their experience, and it is right now running the most successful, or as we sit here today, one of the most the most successful casinos in Maryland. I would have to give a slight edge to who would hold the most conservative projection, so that our revenue forecasts continue to be met, the expectations of the community with respect to employment continue to be met. Turning to what I, again, relate to is the external business strategies. M3D3 and the participation by Leominster was, I would chalk this up in my own wow category. The fact that they could understand what other drivers there were out there to generate additional employment, I think was creative. It's understanding the region of the country, the region of Massachusetts where you're going to operate. A bold initiative. I think we consistently hear of some of the grumblings we hear at those same host community meetings I referenced earlier is, you know, those casinos, they just want you to come in, take all your money, and they don't care what happens outside of their box. This was a creative approach to that, and certainly I would assume their strategy is if there's an economic health to the entire region, that obviously is a good thing for them in the long run. When we looked into, asked questions about what their involvement would be beyond financial support, there were two interesting levels of commitment beyond that, which said they would participate in the decision-making or on the advisory board, and they would also use the business relationships they have to recruit other potential angel investors. With respect to Plainville, I wrestle with the future of harness racing. The jobs in hand that are already associated with those. The fact that purse money is going to be available to help support and nurture that industry. And I'm mindful as I look back to the statute, and this is something I wrestle with. In the statute, it says that we'll provide for new employment opportunities in all sectors, and shall preserve jobs in existing industries in the Commonwealth. And for me, that's a tough qualifier to get over. So, you know, I certainly am looking for the greatest number of jobs, the most reasonable number of jobs that can be expected to be maintained over the course of the license, and obviously, hopefully by the 5-year license life of the slots parlor, that other category 1 casinos will be introduced, and who's going to best be able to manage that competition. And I would like to say that unless I can be talked out of it, I appreciate the Leominster proposal, but I think for maintaining, increasing jobs and maintaining employment, as we've talked about in an existing industry, that I need to lean towards supporting the Plainville application at this point.
All right. I know this is small consolation, but I will reiterate what the other commissioners have said about George Carney and the Carney family. I wrestle with what should be, I mean, fundamentally, these two are, as everybody has said, can do the job. There are no disqualifying differentiators at all. So you try to, figure out what are the key differentiators. You know, what are the values here that really matter the most, and is there a difference between them? The racing issue, I also wrestle with. And for all the reasons that everybody has said, I do think that the legislature did give us guidance on this. The legislature did establish the Racehorse Development Fund and made the judgment, apparently, that the $20+ million a year that will be driven by the racehorse development tax and given to the Racehorse Development Fund, mostly to purses, will do the job of strengthening this industry, presumably harness and thoroughbred was their intent. They did not mandate that any track get a license. They did not mention tracks or racing as a criteria. They did develop a fund that will get $20+ million a year, and there is some reason to believe, and there certainly is a lot of hope, and it certainly is the intent of this commission, that with the help of that Racehorse Development Fund, that the industry, both harness racing and thoroughbred, can be made to prosper. So I find the racing, the fact of saving racing or not, saving, in this case, harness racing or not, I don't think this decision is going to be dispositive one way or the other. I don't think it's an accurate conclusion. It may well be that this particular track under this particular ownership situation closes, but there have been plenty of situations where tracks have gone dark, and as finances have been rearranged, they've reopened. So I don't consider this decision dispositive as to the future of harness racing. In fact, I think the legislature gave us guidance that they believe that simply with the help of the Racehorse Development Fund, that the industry could be maintained. So while it's clearly a factor and it clearly weighs in favor of Plainville, I don't see it as dispositive, and I don't see the future of the harness racing industry as being determined by this vote. The three critical values in my book are, I think, pretty much what others have said, revenue, jobs, and economic development in general. The revenue, I think that's what the legislature did this for. Those were the three reasons this happened. If you set everything else aside, that's what this legislation is all about. The revenue, I think we sort of have to take at face value what the consultant and Commissioner Zuniga came up with. I've expressed my sort of intuitive skepticism about that, and I still feel it. I mean, it feels peculiar to me. It just doesn't feel right to me in some senses to plop down another competitor right into that intensely competitive area. But the facts are what the facts are, and I won't. So from the standpoint of revenue, it looks like it's pretty much a jump ball. From the standpoint of jobs, I think that Leominster gets the nod for the reasons that Commissioner McHugh articulated clearly, and I won't reiterate. On economic development, I think it's really interesting, and there is a little bit of a safe bet and a bigger bet. I mean, I think that the Plainville option is a surefire bet. I mean, it's going to work. It's a proven operator. They're going to do the job. They're going to do the job well. The region is a reasonably healthy region, but for the competition issue, which I've already spoken to, it'll do fine. And it doesn't need to be an economic development engine. The region doesn't need a new economic development engine. It's got a bunch of economic development engines. This would be an add-on. This would be an increment. That would be a nice increment. The Leominster situation is different. The legislature made the judgment that gaming facilities can be economic development engines. There's not a lot of evidence that suggests that a slots parlor can be an economic development engine. But the legislature made the judgment that it could and gave us the mandate to try to make that happen. And we have written our rules and our standards and our evaluation criteria to try to push the envelope, that even the slots parlor, even a $125 million project, is designed by our criteria as well as by legislative direction to make the most that it possibly can be made as an economic development engine. And I think the Leominster folks understood how to take this project and make it a potential engine for economic development in an area that needs economic development badly. The proposal appreciated the North Central Mass region as a region. It will be one of the biggest players, maybe the biggest player in that region. It will have the potential to have a significant impact on that region, change the nature of that region. it understood that it came up with the awareness of the medical device industry, the linkage between UMass Lowell and UMass Medical Center. The M3D3, suggests, as others have said, an appreciation for the need for another kind of economic development. Out of that could come another real serious engine. And adding $1 million to $1.5 million to that mix annually is a real serious proposition, with a high degree of probability that over a period of years, something big will happen. I mean, that's what happens when you take entrepreneurial ventures and you pick them and choose them, and most of them fail, and every once in a while one of them hits. And this is a material contribution to increasing the likelihood that there will be one or more medical device industries that will grow out of this thing that will have a real serious economic impact. Commissioner Stebbins mentioned, as I did yesterday, the Gateway City. We have a public policy in Massachusetts to identify and support gateway cities with the means at our disposal. It's not. Sorry. Sorry. I hate interruptions. Sorry. It's not dispositive. It doesn't. There was no direction in the legislature to favor gateway cities, but public policy in Massachusetts has identified gateway cities as an important priority, and encourages agencies to be supportive as possible. So I think there's and there will be, when there's a competitive environment, that region will still be a standalone region. There is some opportunity for a little entertainment complex to survive there as a standalone unit. There won't be any others, but there's plenty in many other parts of the state. So its role as more than just a slots parlor, as a broad-based entertainment unit, I think is a potentially viable role. So I think there's no way to know what would happen. If we were to pick Leominster, I would want to put in conditions or something. I'd want to make sure that those folks really belly up to the bar. And as I said in my evaluation yesterday, make sure that the energy and enthusiasm and love that's expressed in the competitive process is translated into ongoing action. But I think there's an opportunity to do something really significant in a region of the state that really needs it. I think the bidder understood that and put their shoulder to the wheel. I think the marginal utility of investment in that region is much higher than the marginal utility of an investment in the other region. And I think what the good that we could do by supporting an investment in North Central Mass is greater than the good that we can do by any of the other options, by a fairly substantial amount. So I consider revenue a toss-up. I consider jobs favoring Leominster, and I consider economic development favoring Leominster.
Just a response to all of this, very interesting, very thoughtful. And Mr. Chair, I would agree that if we had a subpar candidate, racing absolutely should not put them over the top. I've always thought that it would have to be a very quality applicant, and then that would be added value. When I looked at just the two applicants, I actually gave Plainville a slight edge because of the really the financial work that was done that gave them a clear edge, and the fact that economic development, again, I said those two were the most important, really had them at a tie. So I gave them a slight edge before we talked about racing, but I mean, I just keep coming back to, and I know there's a potential, and Leominster does have needs. I think all of that is accurate, but when we talk about not just the jobs in racing, but all the other, all the industry itself, and I could go on and on about how many jobs and open space, I just think that is of great value, and for me, that clearly it makes the stronger case when you talk about potentials of what we're saving and, you know, as far as preserving jobs, and it's so many jobs. It's not just those folks at the track, which I've come to learn. So
Is it pretty clear in your mind that that harness racing is dead if this doesn't happen?
I
How
think
do
there's
you-
not a viable option right now and in the near future for someone to make the investment to build another track. I don't believe that's an option that's viable. I don't believe the money set aside is enough to have someone build a new harness track. So yes, I look at it as probably a piece that leaves the Commonwealth if in fact Plainville does not receive this license. I don't look at it as optimistically as you do, Mr. Chair. I really don't.
Why would there have to be another track? If Plainville doesn't get the license and doesn't want to participate in that facility any longer, why wouldn't there be a buyer who could come in and buy it, looking at the increased purse money that's available? It's not only the 9% from the slots, but it's the 2.5% of the 25% too. So that's an ongoing revenue stream that goes in. But comes out to the $20 million bucks. But why wouldn't another buyer come in and pick it up?
Do you want to take that
Yeah,
one?
well,
We have some-
because there's a cost to operate those, first of all, to develop it and then to operate. And the money going to purses does not necessarily flow to the operator. And I think we talk about this fund, and the conduit needs to be the track, and there's an upfront cost in order to make that happen. I do want.
I'm sorry, what is the upfront cost? The track is there, there's a maintenance, maybe it needs to be spruced up a little bit, but it's been operating.
You'd have to purchase it.
Pardon me?
You'd have to purchase it as a starter.
Well, yes, of course. So, oh, I see, that's what you were.
Somebody would have to, yeah,
upfront cost.
somebody would have to purchase.
Okay. Well, okay.
I do want to talk about the economic development on the region. I think I've seen a graph of the horse farms throughout the state, and they really are all throughout. I remember this. I know this is anecdotal, but I should mention. I remember a couple of letters from Leominster, from somebody in Leominster who was in strong favor of the Plainville proposal, and it struck me quickly because I figured this is a little odd. No, they did identify themselves. They are horse owners, and they have a farm in the Leominster area, and they actually would likely move either further up north to Bangor, where they could race, or further south to the Mid-Atlantic region. If there was no standardbred racing conduit here, they could come back if somebody else comes back and buys the track after a few years of going dark. But the reality is that they would move rather quickly. And that's the economic development negative that I view with our decision here in terms of this conversation. So I appreciate that we're looking at the median income of Plainville proper versus Leominster. I think that's a very compelling argument. But as it relates to horse racing, it's a larger, more elusive comparison, because we would have to take into account the horse farms, the hay farms that currently literally feed into this industry, and the economic development there is a bit elusive. You did mention, Mr. Chairman, that there's been plenty of situations where tracks have gone dark. I'm not sure that there's that many, and then come back. There's been plenty of situations.
When I said many, don't jump on the word. There are models where tracks have gone dark, and then the finances get rearranged, and they come back. I don't know many.
Yeah, well, I don't know of any. I'd be interested. I know that there's been plenty of situations where money has come to tracks in the form of gaming, which is essentially the model here. So I think that's an important point.
This is actually, I thought, Jennifer, can you speak to this? I thought that am I wrong that there isn't a history of tracks or racing going dark and then starting up again? Introduce yourself.
Jennifer Durenberger, Director of Racing for the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. Mr. Chair, you're not wrong, but the statutes do differ from state to state, and in some statutes, the operators do receive a percentage of the funds. To Commissioner Zuniga's point, 80% of this Racehorse Development Fund is targeted for purses, and ultimately that is designed to increase the field size, which is designed to increase the wager, which in effect then would help the operator. But the statutes do vary from state to state.
But have some facilities gone dark and started up again?
There have, and I don't have those statistics with me. I apologize.
But you're alluding to when there's money flowing to the tracks, to the operator. That's a source of revenue.
Yes, it is.
That can conceivably give way to someone coming and want to pick up the operation. That's not the case in our statute here because the money flows to purses, not the tracks.
Purses, breeders, and a
Breeders.
benevolency
Yeah.
fund, yes.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's just, but it's a different strategy for doing the same thing. I mean, it's not giving money directly to the operator, but this theory is that it drives purses, which drives fields, which drives quality of racing, which drives betting, which drives money.
Right. Well, it ultimately, I think it goes, in my mind, the way I can explain it to myself is, what's the level of spend? If we take out the slot component, what is the level of spend in terms of economic development that would otherwise go nowhere? And that is the comparison between, that would otherwise not be realized. And I would then be comparing the M3D3 grant program of 1 to 1.5 million to the money that goes to operate racing, which is in excess of 10 million. So if we agree that at least that spend is going to have some economic development, I think there's a real difference there. I also
I thought, isn't,
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, it seems to me that a comment that Commissioner Stebbins made, it really is a recurring theme here, and that is the job that you have today is better than the job you may have tomorrow, or the jobs that you have today are a better bet, a safer bet than the jobs you may have tomorrow. And it seems to me that that's in part, not in part. There's a real philosophical underpinning there that differs from my overall approach, and I guess that is important to say. It seems I agree with Chairman Crosby about the potential for economic development if you put the right entity in the right place at the right time. I think that the Plainville folks have done a terrific job creating a facility and a business model that's right for that environment and for that place, and it comes right out of their background. That's what they do. They do it well. They know how to do it. They'll be successful at it. The Cordish people are developers. They're not game people. And they have, in my view, looked at what they have in Leominster with a developer's eye, an entrepreneurial eye. What can we make of this? That's where the M3D3 thing came from. That's an out-of-the-box thinking. They're in a place that needs economic development. It needs imagination. it needs people who are going to use a facility, a revenue-generating facility, as a mechanism for leveraging development in that area. And I believe that that's why they're looking at that. I believe from what they've said, who they are, what their background is, they've got a very successful gaming place in Baltimore. But they also have a successful venture in the 3 Stadium area there that doesn't have anything to do with gaming. They've got malls that they've built. And they've got a history of success and all of that. And that's an entrepreneurial history of success in a variety of different consumer-oriented venues and areas. And they've been engines for economic development in each of those. And so philosophically, it seems to me, not only is it better to take the dollars that this is going to generate and put them in a place that most needs it, but in terms of the potential punch that putting the right developer in the right place is a quality that's really important to think about. And I recognize, I do recognize the potential impact on the racing. And I do want to figure out everything we can do to save those jobs, not only, as I said, because of the economic value, but because of the people who are involved in them and the rural character of Massachusetts. But I do think that philosophically, in terms of promoting long-term growth, this is the other way would be the better way to go. I just wanted to jump in and say that because it seems to me we are thoughtfully coming at this thing from I think 2 different philosophical perspectives, and both of which each of which is valid. But
I did want to mention something about projections. You already touched on it where I was going, but projections of jobs. I think it's rather straightforward to put a number into a projection, but it all depends on what ultimately the market does. It starts with how much money and how many patrons can come to the facility. So I don't put as much weight as it would seem in the difference between an applicant who projected 600 jobs and someone else who projected 500 jobs for their operations. We didn't put a lot of weight into whether somebody projected 2 million or 10 million more on a present value. The real analysis that we were trying to achieve was whether those projections were realistic and whether they took, in the context of competition, the operations, their business plan, and other things. So I would emphasize that notion that a job today is better than any job that we can project into, that one job today is better than one job tomorrow. I also think that this is a very unique industry in the sense that the real engine, what gives anybody the ability to do all these promises, mitigation, M3, D3, racing, is gaming. The gaming, if people come in and play in the slot machines, then everything else can happen. And to me, that's the genesis of, or the case for looking at who we believe may be the best operator, who we believe may have the experience to react in a nimble way with the constraints that they may face, and in a competitive environment. Who has done this before similarly in other places? And while I think that it's very important to highlight that the development piece, I think that the operating piece is the one that endures and gives the ability to fulfill all these other promises, to continue to fund whatever they said they were going to do. So I think we should, well, the way I'm coming from at this is the experience and the bench strength that a national operator brings. There is very little that we can come up with in terms of regulation that they have not seen. And in the case of Penn, there are a number of facilities of the similar size, of the same size, that they have throughout the country. So there's a corporate culture and corporate strength there to establish procedures, to manage. I can imagine somebody at the corporate office looking at metrics and saying, maybe you need to calibrate here, and in order to operate as nimble and as flexible as possible, because this facility will face competition from the Category 1s, and how they react, I think, is ultimately very, very important.
It's interesting. I actually look at the same set of facts and see it somewhat differently. And as with several of these things, this is sort of a philosophy issue. When you say nimble and flexible, what that usually refers to is the entrepreneurial company, a privately held entrepreneurial company, which is what the Cordish companies are. You're using nimble and flexible on behalf of the big public company, which is just, to me, that I think of it. I was struck during the presentations and the background checks that this REIT negotiation was going on, and the senior management of Penn was consumed with financial engineering. That's what was going on. That was, and they have to be. That's their job. They have a very high priority of a stock price to worry about, and that's going to override everything else. A private company, doesn't have those kinds of considerations. And in this case, there's a private company with people's name on the door. It's a very personalized kind of style, kind of business. They are infinitely smart and capable operators. To suggest that they would be able to react less well to competition doesn't seem very realistic to me. I think they probably both can, but I can't imagine that the Maryland Live operators would be less shrewd in reacting to competition. So I actually, this is a relatively small matter, but in a certain respect, I prefer the idea of having the operator be a private company, an entrepreneurial private company, as opposed to a big public company.
Yeah, and can I just mention something to the nimble and flexible? I wasn't meaning their corporate structure being nimble. I was meaning the amount of jobs that they may have projected in order to operate. I think they may be reading the marketplace and the financials and saying, we don't need the amount of people that we need, the amount of people that we need to employ. Therefore, our projection is smaller comparatively, is only this many. And that's the conclusion I was drawing from other areas of their operations.
I think we really are getting into down into a fundamental philosophical difference. The idea that a job today is better than a job tomorrow just strikes me as philosophically different from the way I see the world. I'm not, and I say that while agreeing that net jobs in the immediate short term is an important consideration. But half the jobs, 60% of the jobs that we have today aren't going to be the jobs that are available in 10 years, 15 years. And it seems to me that, that's one of the things that a lot of people are thinking about and have to think about, is where to put the economic engines of the future. That's why there's a really strong push, I think we'll see developing in the near future, about putting the next innovation center in the Dudley Square area. Try to lift all boats with the kind of energy and synergy that kind of a facility and that kind of an operation generates. So that we have to look at where the jobs of the future are going to come from, and where we need to ensure that nobody's left behind, because the leaving behind piece is a huge destabilizing factor. I don't want to put too much on this, say that putting a slots parlor in Leominster is going to save us all from ruin, but it is a piece of an economic development potential that we need, I submit, to think about and help to foster, because that is a place where people can be left behind. And we do need to think about innovative ways and take chances on innovative ways to help those areas grow economically. So it is a really philosophical difference, I think.
I just wanted to ask Commissioner Stemmons if you have any more thoughts or...
Well, in a couple of things, as we've been talking about this a little bit more. We talked about it a lot. It was expressed to us a lot, this notion of the gateway city. And Mr. Chairman, I want to just go back and maybe give it a different perspective than yours on the gateway city designation. I live in a gateway city. It certainly is never a promise that when the administration has a business to locate, that they pick a gateway city, or else Springfield would be booming and my house value would go up, which would be great. So, again, it's an administrative program that focuses dollars available through certain programs into, I believe it's 13 or 14 communities across the state. So that didn't weigh from, yes, it's a symbol, it's certainly a representation of again, the economic distress or the economic stability of a region, but I was worried that you were making an allusion to the fact that if we have this ability to put a business into a gateway city, that should be a driving factor based on that programmatic aspect. Maybe it wasn't, but...
No, I certainly didn't mean that there's any legal compulsion. I meant just as a matter of public policy, many governors have singled out these kinds of cities as through a gateway city program specifically, but also just as, there's lots of governors that are looking to figure out how you can bring stimulus to cities that need them, including Springfield. And
Okay.
so that's what I meant.
Okay.
And
I appreciate
it's,
that.
it's sort of the way that Commissioner McHugh is talking about this, that if economic development, what is the strategy of economic development? One of our mandates is economic development. What is the strategy that we'll use to implement that?
And I just want to touch on another point. And I also find this a very hard argument to juggle of, the question of a job in hand today is better than the prospect for a job in hand tomorrow. And again, I alluded to it earlier that, I was pleased that, the Leominster applicant thought this much outside the box to think of the impact it could have on the region. This is only obviously a small part of our consideration, but through the M3D3 program. Let's keep in mind that there is an opportunity for the M3D3 program to be successful without awarding the license to Leominster. The previous funding mechanisms for the precursor program, M2D2, is all through the state. Not to make promises to the state that they need to belly up and fund M3D3. Conversely with that, I think it's more of a shaky ground to think of, even though we know there is a source of revenue through the slots for the racing fund, of how the racing fund would be able to stand up the horse racing industry. This gnaws at me a little bit because I'd like to consider myself a capitalist, and if you go by the wayside because the economic times dictate that, then that's the case, or else we'd still have a lot of whip makers out in Westfield. So I keep coming back to that point and wrestling with that point.
And at the moment, you still lean to Plainville? Is that bottom line, or are you?
I lean towards, yeah, I somewhat still lean towards Plainville. I appreciate or would reiterate the statement Commissioner McHugh had that, you know, if Leominster's is chosen, that we need to redouble our efforts to find a secure strategy for making sure that Plain Ridge or another harness track doesn't go dark for long. You know, we have talked about, you know, pursuing legislative changes to the existing statute with regard to racing and gaming, and I'm forecasting a little bit too far on the future.
Yeah, I guess I just have trouble with all the speculative. I don't see a real nexus to a lot of jobs through this one program. I know that there are a prognosis. I just don't see that when I compare it to the jobs that are there today and all of the other ancillary industries associated with those jobs. And, you know, we can talk about wanting to stand up, you know, and support racing. Frankly, I don't see a way to do that either. I don't see what we as a commission could do to encourage someone to buy a track or in any other way help the industry. So I'm just trying to deal with facts as I see them, and as I see things, one is very speculative, although, you know, there's so many good things that come out of speculative kinds of propositions. I understand that, but comparing it to an existing industry that really is very widespread with lots of tentacles, I am not convinced that to go in the other direction.
Well,
I think
go ahead.
I think we might be here longer than I thought. And it's approaching lunchtime. Do we need to think about breaking or something
I
else?
was just going to bring that up. I mean, I think it would make sense to take a break. I mean, I think we've all gone a pretty deep dive on the first round. I don't know whether anything will change particularly, but we all probably could use the chance to stew on it. I do want to talk a little bit with staff about the process over the next day and a half, and just make sure that we're tracking on that properly. Commissioners will not be able to talk to one another about this besides a group of two. Two people can talk, but no more than two can talk. So nobody will miss any deliberations. We're not going to go off and deliberate. We're just going to go off and have lunch. So let's come back at 1 o'clock and pick up and see where we're at. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good.
Okay, good.